The king thanked her, and commanded her to show his knights where this man might be found. She led the Kingsguard to a wine sink where the villain was discovered with a whore in his lap and 3 of Lord Rhaego's rings on his fingers. Under torture, he soon gave up the names of the other attackers, and they were taken one and all. One of their number claimed to have been a poor fellow, and cried out that he wished to take the black. No, Jachaerys told him. The Night's Watch are men of honor, and you are lower than rats. Such men as these were unworthy of a clean death by sword or axe, he ruled. Instead they were hung from the walls of the Red Keep, disemboweled, and left to twist until they died, their entrails swinging loose down to their knees. The girl who had led the king to the killers had a kinder fate. Taken in hand by Queen Alysanne, she was plunged into a tub of hot water for a scrubbing. Her clothes were burned, her head was shaved, and she was fed hot bread and bacon. There is a place for you in the castle, if you want it, Alysanne told her when her belly was full. In the kitchens or the stables, as you wish. Do you have a father? The girl gave a shy nod and admitted that she did. He was one o' them bellies you cut open. The poxy one, why, the sty. Then she told her grace that she wanted to work in the kitchens. That's where they keeps the bread. The old year ended and a new year began, but there were few celebrations anywhere in Westeros to mark the coming of the 60th year since Aegon's conquest. A year before, great bonfires had been lit in public squares and men and women had danced around them, drinking and laughing, whilst bells rang in the new year. 1 year later the fires were consuming corpses, and the bells were tolling out the dead. The streets of King's Landing were empty, especially by night. The alleyways were deep in snow, and icicles hung down from the rooftops, long as spears. Atop Aegon's high hill, King Jachaerys ordered the gates of the Red Keep closed and barred, and doubled the watch on the castle walls. He and his queen and their children attended sunset services at the castle sept, repaired to Maegor's Holdfast for a modest meal, and then retired to bed. It was the hour of the owl when Queen Alysanne was awoken by her daughter shaking her gently by the arm. Mother, Princess Daenerys said, I'm cold. There is no need to dwell on all that followed. Daenerys Targaryen was the darling of the realm, and all that could be done for any man was done for her. There were prayers and poultices, hot soups and scalding baths, blankets and furs and hot stones, nettle tea. The princess was 6, and years past being weaned, but a wet nurse was summoned, for there were some who believed that mother's milk could cure the shivers. Maesters came and went, septons and septas prayed. The king commanded that 100 new rat-catchers be hired at once, and offered a silver stag for every dead rat, gray or black. Daenerys wanted her kitten, and her kitten was brought to her, though as her shivering grew more violent it squirmed from her grasp and scratched her hand. Near dawn, Jachaerys bolted to his feet shouting that a dragon was needed, that his daughter must have a dragon, and ravens took wing for Dragonstone, instructing the dragonkeepers there to bring a hatchling to the Red Keep at once. None of it mattered. A day and a half after she had woken her mother from sleep complaining of feeling cold, the little princess was dead. The queen collapsed in the king's arms, shaking so violently that some feared she had the shivers too. Jachaerys had her taken back to her own chambers and given milk of the poppy to help her sleep. Though near exhaustion, he went next to the yard and loosed Vermithor, then flew to Dragonstone to tell them there was no need for the hatchling after all. On his return to King's Landing, he drank a cup of dreamwine and sent for Septon Barth. How could this happen? He demanded. What sin did she commit? Why would the gods take her? How could this happen? But even Barth, that wise man, had no answers for him. The king and queen were not the only parents to lose a child to the shivers. Thousands of others, highborn and low, knew the same pain that winter. For Jachaerys and Alysanne, however, the death of their beloved daughter must have seemed especially cruel, for it struck at the very heart of the doctrine of exceptionalism. Princess Daenerys had been Targaryen on both sides, with the blood of old Valyria running pure through her veins, and those of Valyrian descent were not like other men. Targaryens had purple eyes and hair of gold and silver, they ruled the sky on dragons, the doctrines of the faith and the prohibitions against incest did not apply to them. And they did not get sick. Since Aenar the Exile first staked his claim to Dragonstone, that had been known. Targaryens did not die of pox or the bloody flux, they were not afflicted with red spots or brown leg or the shaking sickness, they would not succumb to warmbone or clotted lung or sorget or any of the myriad pestilences and contagions that the gods, for reasons of their own, see fit to loose on mortal men and women. There was fire in the blood of the dragon, it was reasoned, a purifying fire that burned out all such plagues. It was unthinkable that a pure-born princess should die shivering, as if she were some common child. And yet she had. Even as they mourned for her and the sweet soul she had been, Jachaerys and Alysanne must also have been confronting that awful realization. Mayhaps the Targaryens were not so close to gods as they had believed. Mayhaps, in the end, they too were only men. When the shivers finally ran its course, King Jachaerys went back to his labors with a sadder heart. His first task was a grim one, replacing all the friends and counselors he had lost. Lord Manfred Redwyn's eldest son, Sir Robert, was named to command the city watch. Sir Giles Morrigan brought forth 2 good knights to join the Kingsguard, and his grace duly presented Sir Ryam Redwyn and Sir Robin Shaw with white cloaks. The able Albin Massey, his bent-backed justiciar, was not so easily replaced. To fill his seat, the king reached out to the Vale of Arryn and summoned Roderick Arryn, the erudite young lord of the Eyrie, who he and the queen first met as a boy of 10. The Citadel had already sent him Benefer's successor, the sharp-tongued Grand Maester Alysanne. 20 years younger than the man whose chain he donned, Alysanne had never had a thought he didn't feel the need to share. Some claimed that the conclave had sent him to King's Landing to be rid of him. Jachaerys hesitated longest when it came to selecting his new Lord Treasurer and Master of Coin. Rego Draz, however despised, had been a man of great ability. I am tempted to say you do not find such men lying about in the streets, but if truth be told, we are more like to find one there than sitting in some castle, the king told his council. The Lord of Air had never married, but he did have 3 bastard sons who had learned his business at his knee. Much as the king was tempted to reach out to one of them, he knew the realm would never accept another pentoshi. It must needs be a lord, he concluded gloomily. Familiar names were bandied once again. Lannister, Valerian, Hightower, houses built on gold as much as steel. They are all too proud, Jachaerys said. It was Septon Barth who first proposed a different name. The Tyrells of Highgarden are descended from stewards, he reminded the king, but the reach is broader than the Westerlands, with a different sort of wealth, and young Martin Tyrell might prove a useful addition to this council. Lord Redwyn was incredulous. The Tyrells are dolts, he said. I am sorry, your grace, they are my liege lords, but the Tyrells are dolts, and Lord Bertrand was a sot as well. That is as it may be, Septon Barth admitted. Lord Bertrand is in his grave now, however, and I am speaking of his son. Martin is young and eager, but I will not vouch for the quality of his wits. His wife, however, is a Fossoway girl, the Lady Florence, who has been counting apples since she learned to walk. She has been keeping all the accounts at Highgarden since her marriage, and it is said she has increased House Tyrell's incomes by 1/3. Should we appoint her husband, she would come to court as well, I do not doubt. Alysanne would like that, the king said. She enjoys the company of clever women. The queen had not been attending council since the death of Princess Daenerys. Mayhaps Jachaerys hoped that this would help bring her back to him again. Our good Septon has never led us wrong. Let us try the dolt with the clever wife, and hope that my leal smallfolk do not beat his head in with a cobblestone. The 7 take and the 7 give. Mayhaps the mother above looked down on Queen Alysanne in her grief and took pity on her broken heart. The moon had not turned twice since Princess Daenerys's death when her grace learned that she was once again carrying a child. With winter holding the realm in its icy grip, the queen once again chose caution and retired to Dragonstone for her lying in. Late that year, 60 AC, she was delivered of her 5th child, a daughter she named Alyssa after her mother. An honor her grace would have appreciated more had she been alive, observed the new Grand Maester, Alysanne, though not in the king's hearing. Winter broke not long after the queen gave birth, and Alyssa proved to be a lively, healthy child. As a babe she was so like her late sister, Daenerys, that the queen oft wept to behold her, remembering the child she had lost. The likeness faded as the princess grew older. However, long-faced and skinny, Alyssa had little of her sister's beauty. Her hair was a dirty blonde tangle with no hint of silver to evoke the dragonlords of old, and she had been born with mismatched eyes, one violet, the other a startling green. Her ears were too big and her smile lopsided, and when she was 6 playing in the yard a whack across the face from a wooden sword broke her nose. It healed crooked, but Alyssa did not seem to care. By that age, her mother had come to realize that it was not Daenerys that she took after, but Balon. Just as Balon had once followed Aemon everywhere, Alyssa trailed after Balon. Like a puppy, the spring prince complained. Balon was 2 years younger than Aemon, Alyssa nearly 4 years younger than him, and a girl, which made it far worse in his eyes. The princess did not act like a girl, however. She wore boys' clothes when she could, shunned the company of other girls, preferred riding and climbing and dueling with wooden swords to sewing and reading and singing, and refused to eat porridge. An old friend, an old adversary, returned to King's Landing in 61 AC, when Lord Rhaegar Baratheon rode up from Storm's End to deliver 3 young girls to court. 2 were the daughters of his brother, Ronald, who had died shivering together with his wife and sons. The third was Lady Jocelyn, his lordship's own daughter by Queen Alyssa. The small frail babe who had come into the world during the terrible year of the stranger had grown into a tall young girl of solemn mien, with large dark eyes and hair black as sin. Rhaegar Baratheon's own hair had gone gray, however, and the years had taken their toll of the old king's hand. His face was pale and lined, and he had grown so gaunt that his clothes hung loose upon him, as if they had been cut for a much larger man. When he took a knee before the Iron Throne, he had trouble rising back to his feet, and required the help of a Kingsguard to stand. He had come to ask a boon, Lord Rhaegar told the king and queen. Lady Jocelyn would soon be celebrating her 7th nameday. She has never known a mother. My brother's wives looked after her as much as they were able, but they favored their own children as mothers will, and now both of them are gone. If it please you, sires, I would ask you to accept Jocelyn and her cousins as wards, to be raised here at court beside your own sons and daughters. It would be our honor and our pleasure, Queen Alysanne replied. Jocelyn is our own sister, we have not forgotten our blood. Lord Rhaegar seemed much relieved. I would ask you to look after my son as well. Boromund will remain at Storm's End, in the charge of my brother Garon. He is a good boy, a strong boy, and he will be a great lord in time, I do not doubt, but he is only 9. As your graces know, my brother Borys left the Stormlands some years ago. He grew sour and angry after Boromund was born, and things went from bad to worse between us. Borys was in Myr for a time, and later in Volantis, doing gods know what. But now he has turned up in Westeros again, in the Red Mountains. The talk is that he has joined up with the Vulture King, and is raiding his own people. Garon is an able man, and leal, but he never was a match for Borys, and Boromund is but a boy. I fear for what may befall him, and the Stormlands, when I am gone. That took the king aback. When you are gone. Why should you be gone? Where do you mean to go, my lord? Lord Rhaegar's answering smile showed a glimpse of his old ferocity. Into the mountains, your grace. My maester says that I am dying. I believe him. Even before the shivers there was pain. It has gotten worse since. He gives me milk of the poppy, and that helps, but I use only a little. I would not sleep away what life remains to me. Nor would I die abed, bleeding out of my ass. I mean to find my brother Borys and deal with him, and with this Vulture King as well. A fool's errand, Garon calls it. He is not wrong. But when I die, I want to die with my axe in my hand, screaming a curse. Do I have your leave, your grace? Moved by his old friend's words, King Jachaerys rose and descended from the Iron Throne to clap Lord Rhaegar by the shoulder. Your brother is a traitor, and this vulture I will not call him king has vexed our marches long enough. You have my leave, my lord. And more than that, you have my sword. The king was true to his word. The fight that followed is named in the histories as the Third Dornish War, but that is a misnomer, for the Prince of Dorne kept his armies well out of the conflict. The small folk of the time called it Lord Rhaegar's War, and that name is far more apt. Whilst the Lord of Storm's End led 500 men into the mountains, Jachaerys Targaryen took to the air, on Vermithor. He calls himself a vulture, the king said, but he does not fly. He hides. He should call himself the gopher. He was not wrong. The first Vulture King had commanded armies, leading thousands of men into battle. The second was no more than an upjumped raider, the minor son of a minor house with a few hundred followers who shared his taste for robbery and rape. He knew the mountains well, however, and when pursued he would simply disappear, to reappear at will. Men who came hunting him did so at their peril, for he was skilled at ambuscade as well. None of his tricks availed him against a foe who could hunt him from above, however. Legend claimed the Vulture King had an impregnable mountain fastness, hidden in the clouds. Jachaerys found no secret lair, only a dozen rude camps scattered here and there. One by one, Vermithor flamed them all, leaving the vulture only ashes to return to. Lord Rogar's column, winding their way into the heights, were soon forced to abandon their horses and proceed on foot along goat tracks, up steep slopes, and through caves, whilst hidden four-rolled stones down about their heads. Yet still they came on, undaunted. As the Stormlanders proceeded from the east, Simondandarian, Lord of Blackhaven, led a small host of Marcher knights into the mountains from the west, to seal off escape from that side. Whilst the hunters crept toward one another, Jachaerys watched them from the sky, moving them about as once he had moved toy armies in the chamber of the painted table. In the end, they found their foes. Borys Baratheon did not know the mountain's hidden ways as the Dornish did, so he was the first to be cornered. Lord Rogar's men made short work of his own, but as the brothers came face to face, King Jachaerys descended from the sky. "I would not have you named a kinslayer, my lord," his grace told his former hand. "The traitor is mine." Sir Borys laughed to hear it. "Rather name me a kingslayer than him a kinslayer," he shouted, as he rushed the king. But Jachaerys had Blackfire in hand, and he had not forgotten the lessons he had learned in the yard on Dragonstone. Borys Baratheon died at the king's feet, from a cut to his neck that near took his head off. The Vulture King's turn came the new full moon. Brought to bay in a burned lair where he had hoped to find refuge, he resisted to the end, showering the king's men with spears and arrows. "This one is mine," Rogar Baratheon told his grace when the Mountain King was led before them in fetters. At his command, the outlaw's chains were struck off and he was given a spear and shield. Lord Rogar faced him with his axe. "If he kills me, let him go free." The vulture proved sadly unequal to that task. Wasted and weak and racked with pain as he was, Rogar Baratheon turned the Dornishman's attacks aside contemptuously, then clove him from shoulder to navel. When it was done, Lord Rogar seemed weary. "It seems I will not die with axe in hand after all," he told the king sadly. Nor did he. Rogar Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and one-time Hand of the King and Lord Protector of the realm, died at Storm's End half a year later, in the presence of his maester, his septon, his brother Sir Garon, and his son and heir, Boromund. Lord Rogar's war had lasted less than half a year, begun and won entirely in 61 AC. With the Vulture King eliminated, raiding fell off sharply along the Dornish marches for a time. As accounts of the campaign spread through the Seven Kingdoms, even the most martial of lords gained a new respect for their young king. Any lingering doubts had been dispelled. Jachaerys Targaryen was not his father, Aenys. For the king himself, the war was healing. "Against the shivers I was helpless," he confessed to Septon Barth. "Against the vulture, I was a king again." In 62 AC, the lords of the Seven Kingdoms rejoiced when King Jachaerys conferred upon his eldest the title Prince of Dragonstone, making him the acknowledged heir to the Iron Throne. Prince Aemon was 7 years of age, a boy as tall and handsome as he was modest. He still trained every morning in the yard with Prince Baelon. The two brothers were fast friends, and evenly matched. Aemon was taller and stronger, Baelon quicker and fiercer. Their contests were so spirited that they oft drew crowds of onlookers. Serving men and washerwomen, household knights and squires, maesters and septons and stableboys, they would gather in the yard to cheer on one prince or the other. One of those who came to watch was Jocelyn Baratheon, the late Queen Alyssa's dark-haired daughter, who grew taller and more beautiful with every passing day. At the feast that followed Aemon's investiture as Prince of Dragonstone, the queen sat Lady Jocelyn next to him, and the two young people were observed talking and laughing together through the evening, to the exclusion of all others. That same year, the gods blessed Jachaerys and Alysanne with yet another child, a daughter they named Maegil. A gentle, selfless, and sweet-natured girl, and exceedingly bright, she soon attached herself to her sister Alyssa in much the same way that Prince Baelon had attached himself to Prince Aemon, though not entirely as happily. Now it was Alyssa's turn to bristle at having the baby clinging to her skirts. She evaded her as best she could, and Baelon laughed at her fury. We have already touched upon several of Jachaerys's achievements. As 62 AC drew near its end, the king looked ahead to the year dawning, and all the years beyond, and began to make plans for a project that would transform the Seven Kingdoms. He had given King's Landing cobblestones, cisterns, and fountains. Now he lifted his eyes beyond the city walls, to the fields and hills and bogs that stretched from the Dornish marches to the Gift. "My lords," he told the council, When the Queen and I go forth on our progresses, we go on Vermithor and Silverwing. When we look down from the clouds, we see cities and castles, hills and swamps, rivers and streams and lakes. We see market towns and fishing villages, old forests, mountains, moors, and meadows, flocks of sheep and fields of grain, old battlefields, ruined towers, lichyards and seps. There is much and more to see in these 7 kingdoms of ours. Do you know what I do not see? The king slapped the table hard. Roads, my lord. I do not see roads. I see some ruts, if I fly low enough. I see some game trails, and here and there a footpath by a stream. But I do not see any proper roads. My lords, I will have roads. The building of so many leagues of road would continue throughout the rest of Jachaerys' reign and into the reign of his successor, but it started that day in the council chambers of the Red Keep. Let it not be thought that there were no roads in Westeros before his reign. Hundreds of roads crisscrossed the land, many dating back thousands of years to the days of the first men. Even the children of the forest had paths they followed, when they moved from place to place beneath their trees.